Hey, good morning. We're continuing our series called Don't Look Back, Moving Forward into the Parallel. I'm Dr. Dave Pafford, and this series is really meant to provoke thought related to our emotions and how we don't want to just live in the past, but we want to move into the future. And also how to grow as a person and innovate and have creativity. And so, over the course of the series, we've talked a little bit about how tools shape us and shape our atmosphere, both for good and also for bad. We've talked a little bit about emotions, and I've presented some of the biblical case of seeing how nations transform through being obedient to God and using what's in our hand. And we've looked at everything from garden tools like a shovel to Moses' staff depicted in Exodus. So we're going to continue in the series now, and one of the things that we have to remind ourselves at every age is that we never arrive. We're always arriving. And so the moment we think we've arrived, we get stuck there. And so it's important that even when there are setbacks or challenges, we must believe that anything is possible. And so, how do you do that? Well, I think having not just the right people on the team, but also being the right people for the time matters. And you can see this as part of wisdom. So, what exactly is wisdom? Wisdom is applied knowledge at the right time. Here's what Proverbs 11 says. It says, "A city without wise leaders will end up in ruin. A city with many wise leaders will be kept safe." And again, Proverbs 19. "Listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise." And then finally, Proverbs 15 says, "Plans fail for a lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed." And so we talked again about tools, but tools create efficiency. And so whether it's a farmer working in a field, they can, of course, even with knowledge, work by hand and harvest less than a third of an acre a day. But the average combine today is able to do 650 times more than a human worker by hand, and it's 100 times better than a grain cradle. So there's innovation that takes place, and that innovation is um, built upon a number of things. It's built upon the ideas of and their application, and creating systems and structures to design tools to do things faster than they could simply by our own physical effort. And that's one of the things that makes our age so unique, is the fact that we've found ways to speed up things that used to take much more time. And you can see that a lot of that over the last 100 years really was in industrial spaces, it was in physical spaces. And now we're beginning to see it take form in digital spaces. And it's helping us write faster and helping us build cognitive designs faster. And yet, there's problems. There's problem in the thinking of the AI, which isn't really AI. It's advanced computing, as far as I'm concerned. It's really just spitting out what you're giving it, and it's going on the internet and it's searching free resources, which are never as good as those that are, resources that are paid, because the paid resources are often designed by experts. But these are realities and things that we see at the moment. And so, innovation and popular-wide innovation formula looks something like this: total number of people times the average level of human information and education, the amount of exposure to networks and learning that we share with others, and then finally the capacity of our available tools. That creates for us a predicted rate of innovation in any tribe or culture. And so, as you think about these things, as you think about it as a leader, as you think about it as an employee, there's a moment when there's convergence in some of these things. And we're experiencing the convergence right now of tools and technology, which combined can create even more powerful tools. And so I mentioned this in an earlier part of our series, but we're seeing the combination of AI and genetics and biotech coming together in ways we never imagined. And part of this is the ability for AI to help us find things that we couldn't do on our own through our own computation. And so, for example, there's a CRISPR model that has allowed us to use advanced math to find it's in the billions and trillions uh, of looks into proteins, and they've been able to find and select specific proteins. In fact, I think the last Nobel Prize was awarded, one of the second last, was awarded because of this advancement. But this is a combination of using advanced computing, AI, and also genetics, and creating a place where they can build better systems for our medical advances. And so it's pretty incredible, pretty great, but also has its own set of challenges. And so let's look at what Jesus has to say in this space this morning. So here are some instructions from Jesus as he gave us a mandate. And that mandate or that mission was to be a disciple, a learner, and then to make other disciples and other learners. And here's what he said. He said, this is Matthew 28. It says, "Go therefore make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you." That's really a framework for being a person who's looking to design learning and also to be a learner. And so when we look at like legacy leaders and you study like I've studied leadership for the last 20 years, multiple master's degrees and a doctorate degree, and one of the themes in all of that was how do we improve and how do we serve. And you can look at about every year there's about 11 to 12,000 books written on the subject of leadership. But at the end of the day, legacy leaders always have somebody that's ahead of them speaking truth into their life. And so, that's a I would say Hebraic concept of this idea of truth that's yet to be revealed. It's unveiled truth. It's truth that's forming and continuing. And so I think truth is dynamic. And I don't think it's an abstract idea as much as I think it's unfolding to us as we learn new things. And so part of that is in the space of creativity. And so to be disciples, we must first, be a disciple ourselves, and we must have discipline, meaning we're going to have an ongoing commitment to learning a craft or a skill, growing in our creativity in a specific area. And I believe that it's beneficial to have skills in multiple areas, but also to have a technical expertise in today's world. And so why does creativity matter? The long and short of it is this, that the future of the human race really depends on it. And I believe God set it up that way. So whether you look at like an Elon Musk who's made advances in rockets and batteries and other spaces, or you look at some of the other innovation taking place at the software or the hardware level, that all should be in the focus of loving my neighbor as myself. And that should be the framework of all human ingenuity. All human ingenuity should be driven by this idea of serving my neighbor as myself. And I believe the best ethic for that, of course, is the first ethic that Jesus gave us, which is to love our God with everything. He would say that the law and the prophets hang on those two commands. And so God set this up this way, and it really does take faith, and it takes risk to move into the space of creativity. So your faith can't exist in a vacuum. It's not a cognitive process. It is a cognitive process, but it's also a practical, physical, real life application of risk. It's to assess and figure out what are good risks and what are bad risks, and then take a step in the right direction in the hope that we can innovate on someone else's innovation. And someone once said, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevancy even less. And so I would just say, as we kind of begin to close out this series today, it's important for us as a people of God to be creative. One of the most important components of creativity is actually consumption. Curiosity must be paired with good judgment, because curiosity, like anything else, can be twisted. And this is why selective consumption, is key for creativity. And the narrative in the beginning of the Bible, in the book of Genesis, is connected to this idea of creativity. In fact, the Hebrew concept of craftiness and even the introduction of the snake in the story is this idea that we have desires, and our desires and our passion for seeking out something must be paired toward, it must be guided toward healthy curiosity. If it's not, it always twists, it always becomes perverse. And you see this with great artists, with great musicians. You see this even with people that are designing things and accumulating great wealth that can be used for incredible good, or it can be used as a muse and it can be twisted. And then it becomes so dysfunctional and so destructive. And we just see that a lot. And so there's a revolution here that we have to kind of imagine and see. And so Adam and Eve, as our first parents, were motivated by that curiosity, and they consumed forbidden fruit that God had warned them about. And that story, the Genesis 1 and 2 story, are about a number of things that a lot of people miss. As you study the Hebrew, you see that there's a chiasm there. That's a specific type of Hebrew poem design. It's critical. You're not going to understand the story otherwise. But it's all about learning that God is not looking to shame us, but He's actually trying to make sure that we're listening to the right voices. It's so important that you understand that the very curiosity that can propel your creativity and wonder can also destroy you. And so, in the words of Jesus, it's not what goes into your stomach, but what comes out of your heart that actually can destroy you, because Jesus really understands the cycle of consumption and creativity. Jesus was full of creativity and creative miracles that He did. And I believe He prepared the disciples along the way for some mind-bending shifts, including the shift first to the Gentiles and then to the ends of the earth. And so they went to Samaria. And there's a story in John, I believe it's in John 4, where Jesus meets with a woman who's a Samaritan woman. And it could have gone badly in conversation. And yet Jesus says, yeah, and He demonstrates that He knows who this woman is. And she could have been mad because Jesus called her bluff and said, yeah, you don't have a husband. Actually, I have 5 husbands. And the man you're with now isn't your husband. But she walks away inspired and blown away by the Messiah, this person who told what she says in her words, who told me everything I ever did. And then she goes on to Samaria and she shares that story. Well, why is that in there? Well, I think it's in there because later on in the book of Acts, Philip will leave Jerusalem, the Jewish church, and actually share the gospel with the Gentiles. And then Peter and John actually verified this. So there was innovation in Jesus all along. And He's really changing and flipping things that we may have assumed. Okay, so what exactly is consumption for? Consumption is about feeding your present to prepare and propel your future. So you've got to feed the right types of hungers, and every act is preceded by a curiosity that eventually can translate thought into action. So those who consume the right things and those things that are good will reap goodness, and those that consume the dark ways become dark. And that's maybe an oversimplification, because this gets down to the micro, right? If you look at bodybuilding and you look at elite runners, they're consuming for a specific outcome. The bodybuilder, although he's eating protein, isn't eating the same way that an elite runner is going to eat. Even though they're both elite athletes, their goals are different. And so they're consuming for a specific goal. And so I would say, if you're going to be an engineer, you need to consume a lot of math. You need to consume a lot of science. And it needs to be specific and niche to your field. And so on and so forth. And so as you consume, just remind yourself that consumption prepares your creativity by giving you the raw resources to take a particular project from one step to the next. And so in order to meet the physical ramifications of our day, we must consume food. In the same way, we have to consume products so that we can understand them. And only by understanding them can we advance them. And only by taking them to their limit and to their destruction can we understand how and when to utilize them. And I'll just say this, the artist knows, this is a Jewish idea, but the artist knows when to stop consuming and actually when to stop creating. And when we take things to their limits, you begin to understand that. One of the most powerful things that the artist can do is take the pen or take the paint or take their craft and set it down and say, it's finished, it's done. And you see this really in the creation narrative in the book of Genesis. And again, there's a chiasm here in the book of Genesis in Hebrew. And it's actually a massive, massive chiasm with all sorts of patterns that are built into the text there. And Hebrew people would have understood the beauty of the poem that's there and what's trying to be demonstrated. And just the beauty of the design of that whole literary piece alone. And so when we talk about consumption, again, it's preparation, but only in the understanding can you improve upon former ideas, formulations, and physical products. So their foundation must be understood for there to be a next step in enhancing their individual capability. So we consume to understand, not only understand what an idea or product can do, but also what it cannot do or cannot articulate or cannot support. And so by understanding a product's limit, we begin to see that the bleeding edge there. And the edge is, again, where creativity can begin to shape. And so it's this idea of when we explore the unknown, when we have natural curiosity, when we set aside orthodoxy for the moment, can we better understand that product or understand what God wants to do in the world? And so proper curiosity is consuming to understand. I used to say to my students, you got to know all the rules so that you know the rules you broke when you break them. That's so critical for this. And so consuming is always for the purpose of improving. Otherwise, it's not the right way to go about being a person of innovation and moving forward. And so we want to consume also to connect. So consumption prepares us for creation by showing us potential connections. Because often there are connections in our world. And so seemingly unrelated forms and objects and ideas and languages and stories as metaphors, similes, jokes, all these things can often draw on the new and surprising ways that we can connect words together. And there's just a lot here that we can talk about as it relates. And so the word economy, even the very word economy, can be traced back to this Greek word oikonomos, which simply means one who manages a household. And so there's an example of that in Luke 12:42. And here's what it says. It says, the Lord answered, who then is the wise and faithful manager whom the master put in charge of his servants? So the economy is people exchanging their work with one another. It's a place that people do the work that cultivates creation. And the entire point of all of this is to have a space for fruitful and creative work. And God connects that idea to this idea of that you were made for more than just work. And the very idea of God introduced in the book of Genesis that Moses would introduce to the Hebrew slaves is the fact that you're not defined by how many bricks you can make. And you're not defined by how much you can produce, but actually you're defined by your Creator and you're made in His image. And out of that, creativity and fruitfulness flow. And so there's, a lot of innovation have taken place on the concept and construct of economy. And you can look through many different epochs and eras, from the Assyrians to the Babylonians to the Greco-Roman economy to the advancement of what the Netherlands and that area of the world, the Dutch, really informing the first stock market. All those things happening, the British Empire and beyond. And so a disciple in my world today does mean more than just this idea of being underneath a consistent rabbi. It means having multiple rabbis that understand things like employment, ownership, and commerce in a discipleship journey. So your consumption is often the driving power for cultivation of creation. So again, why it's so important that consumption is gotten right. So you have a call as a craftsperson or an artisan. Your call is fostered by grace. This idea of grace in the New Testament is this Greek word charis, and it's made possible by your giftings. And there's the word again. It's charisma or graceism, right? So whenever you see the word gifts, you also have to see the word grace. And ultimately that is for charity, the love of my neighbor as myself. So if you're, a basketball player, yeah, you may have to work at it, but you also may be tall. And that's part of the gifting and the grace. And it's only through that support that you find satisfaction in the economy made by the Creator God. And so as we close up this series, I want to just invite you back to your group, your table, your discussion, or if you're watching this online, in your house church. Aside from food, what is a non-negotiable consumable for you, and why? Next, how do you fight against the pressure to consume the dangerous, the unhealthy, or the unnecessary? And I would just kind of give you a hint here. There's times to fast. There's times to simplify. Okay. Next is this another just introduction of an idea, but also discussion. So here I'm just mentioning envy. Envy is such a distractive and a destructive force for people. So to avoid an area associated with envy, have you ever unplugged from an area completely for a season? What did it feel like? Was it their peace or was there anxiety? What are some of the unsolved problems in today's world, and how could creativity fit into a solution? And so I just want to say thanks. Thanks for joining us online today as we've done this. Take this back to your church, your group, and I hope it blesses you like it has blessed other people.